the Entertainah Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Got a couple things I'm going to talk about today. Before I do it, I want to give a big thank you to the sports influencer. Slurpy's the man. I'm going to have his channel in the link below. He was the one that actually made this new background for me. Tell me what you guys think. I like to switch it up, and it's got my socials there as well if you guys want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter. So thank you, Slurpy, for that. One of my greatest subscribers I've had since pretty much the beginning of this channel. Can't say thank you enough. In addition to that, I just want to say tonight, if you guys are interested, as you know, I've been doing a couple of film breakdowns with Fireside Giants. I'm going to be premiering it tonight. We did a film breakdown of Micah Parsons, as voted on by you guys on Twitter, one of the best defensive prospects in this year's draft class. Of course, there's allegations. We touch on that in the video as well, but it'll be a live chat with a pre-recorded video if you guys want to stop by around 7 or 7:30. It's about an hour long. So come on by. We'll talk some New York Giants football. I'll be in the chat. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the news of the day. It actually came out yesterday from Tom Pelissero. A lot of you guys asked me to touch on it on Twitter about the salary cap and what the New York Giants may be able to do with this newfound money. Now, nothing is official as of yet, but reported by Tom Pelissero, and Spot Track actually updated the numbers. Expect the salary cap to be higher than initially reported. That 175 number that's been reported was the minimum that I think they agreed on, but it could be even higher. And I've seen some rumors upwards of 195. But according to Pelissero and several others, it will be 185 or potentially more. Now, when that number is going to officially come out, well, I'm going to get into that in this video as well. I'm also going to touch on what Michael Irvin had to say, and with maybe some of this newfound cap space, it could be an option for the New York Giants to go out and potentially get the wide receiver that he thinks the New York Giants should absolutely be targeting in Kenny Golladay. I'll go over some of the options that the Giants will have to try to clear up some cap space and whether or not I think Golladay is a best option for the New York Giants at the wide receiver position. But first, I wanted to jump into some of the quotes about the salary cap. This coming out from Tom Pelissero. The NFL and NFL Players Association began preliminary negotiations last month on the 2021 salary cap, which some believe will end up higher than expected. It's one of several key issues as the sides brace for another unusual offseason with the Super Bowl days away. He later went on to say in that article that it could be around $185 million. Thad Brown, who I believe talks about the Buffalo Bills, said according to the NFL salary cap, it may be $10 million or more higher than expected. Would be huge for the Bills. He goes on to talk about his team. This then was in the article in which he was talking about when he thinks it could actually come to fruition, what exactly it will be. Chiefs owner Clark Hunt told reporters this week the final number may not be set until hours before the start of the league year, March 17th. That is when you have free agency. So we may not get the exact figures until then, but it's looking more and more realistic that it's going to be higher than initially anticipated. More realistically, teams may not find out the number just days before the free agent negotiation period begins in March 15th, with the league and the union taking all the time possible to assess the climate and budget for the impact of at least one new media deal, which must be finalized before the NFL makes the expected move to a 17-game regular season in 2021. And you would only think with an additional game that would only add revenue. Now, the question you have to ask yourself, and may not be answered by March 15th, more than likely will not be answered as you see the numbers rising and everything else with the virus. Do they think or know whether or not they're going to be able to have a full capacity stadium? Obviously, that is the whole reason why these numbers have decreased to 175 or projected to be at a minimum of 175. So that's what we're going to have to wait and see, and that's I'm sure what they're going to be talking about in these meetings. But if that is the case, and if the Giants will have more money than initially reported, and now Spot Track has updated their numbers, this was a little bit more than negative $2 million. Now with the additional $10 million, it's risen to just under $8 million. And I've talked about in the past that there's things they could do. They could backload contracts, and they could maneuver salary cap to create more space. But if the cap is going to be $10 million higher, well, that's great for the New York Giants. And I'll talk about some of the options that they may be able to do with this newfound space if this is the official number. And like I said, from what I've gathered, from what I've read, most people feel like at this point it's very possible that it could be even a little bit more than 185. But if we're going to be conservative like Spot Track is being here, and it will be $185 million, and it's actually 189 with the rollover I've talked about in the past, and we have $8 million as of now. Like I said, you could probably free up between $8 and $10 million by redistributing money on players' contracts like Sterling Shepard, Mayo, not Mayo, rather, Shepard, Martinez, and Bradbury. And if you were able to free up $8 to $10 million by redistributing salary from within the roster, you're talking about bumping that number up to $16 to $18 million. And then the obvious cuts of Solder after June 1st, who may very well retire, would save you 10. That's 26 to 28 million. Tate another 6 gets you to 32 to 34 million. Toilo is 3, so we'll say 37. Pulley's another 2.7 with Mayo's 5 combined, 2.3 and 2.7. And then Core with another +2, and that gets you right around the $50 million mark. In addition to that, you have the option with Zeitler for 12 and Riley Dixon with 2.7. But even if you weren't to cut those guys with some redistribution, the newfound cap space, and cutting the obvious players, it would get you around $50 million. And then if you cut Zeitler, it would get you upwards of 60. But the way that I look at this personally, as a New York Giant fan, and I've expressed that I think it's in the best option of the New York Giants going into next year to have Zeitler on this roster, because quite frankly, I don't trust the players we have at the guard spot. Getting this extra $10 million, if that's the case, may give you the freedom to keep Kevin Zeitler. Now, you always could try to give him an extension, maybe to give yourself a little bit more freedom on this year's cap. I think he's $14 million against the cap this year, only $2 million if you were to cut him. But he is our most experienced guy on that offensive line, and you want continuity going forward. Maybe extend him for a year or two, and you make it so it's only an $8 or $9 million hit this year. So we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out. But the one thing I will say, I think it gives you more freedom to potentially keep Kevin Zeitler on this roster. And if you have $50 million, let's just say that's what they're going to have to spend now, well, you figure 18 of it probably goes to a guy like Leonard Williams, and if you keep Dalvin Tomlinson, that's like another 10 to 12 if you were to keep both. Of course, you could elect to let one walk, and that will be an option that the New York Giants have. But with the extra $10 million, it's entirely possible that if they want to come here, a guy like Kenny Golladay could be an option for the New York Giants. And Michael Irvin went on to talk about it and why he thinks he may very well be the best fit. They absolutely, they should absolutely try to get this kid, Irvin said. I think he would make a huge difference to give the Giants something that they need from the wide receiver position. Allen Robinson is another guy that may be coming, but a guy like Golladay would be big in New York. And Kenny Golladay, I've talked about in the past. I don't got to pull his stats up. He's a guy that I clearly see the attraction, if you're a pro Kenny Golladay guy, to the New York Giants. He's 6'4". The major question mark I have with him is the injury history, right? He had an injury this year, but he's 6'4". He's the exact type of wide receiver that we need, right? He had 11 touchdowns, which led the league last year, in 2019, not 2020, and he averaged almost 19 yards of reception. It's a big play threat. It's what you want in the Eric Coryell scheme, and would immediately bring credibility to that wide receiving core and give you more freedom in the draft. Now, what some people will say that don't want a guy like Kenny Golladay and don't want a guy like Allen Robinson is, I don't want to spend $16, $17, $18 million at the wide receiver position when you can just draft the guy in the second round. And that's all well and good, and that's fair, but I do like the freedom it presents in the draft, and nobody is a guarantee in the draft. You don't know that you're going to get that level of wide receiver even in the first round. There's so many busts. There's so many guys that have busted, particularly at that position. So I would completely understand if it was in the budget and Golladay wanted to come here, the New York Giants going out there and trying to bring him in. But you have to ask yourself as a Giants fan, as much as we may want him, would he want the New York Giants? Would he feel like he fit in this scheme? Would he feel like he'd be the number one guy? He does remind me, at least the type of receiver he is, to a Plaxico Burress. Burress came here in Eli's second year, and he definitely helped the growth of his young quarterback. Yeah, I think he'd be great for Daniel Jones if he fits the budget and if you're still able to keep a guy like Leonard Williams and you don't see that defense fall apart. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I wanted to touch on the salary cap. And yeah, $10 million could go a long way for this football team, and it sounds like the New York Giants will have it. Of course, when assessing that, you also have to factor in that every team around the league will have a $10 million buff as well, and maybe not as many players will hit the open market as we initially anticipated, being that some teams will find ways to make it fit the cap. In the end, I'm sure Abrams will play with the numbers and will find ways to get guys back here, and I think Leonard Williams will more than likely be back with the New York Giants. The only question is, how do they go about doing it? Will it be a franchise tag? Will it be a multi-year contract? We'll have to wait and see what Gettleman decides. Gettleman has played hardball before, though. Don't forget that. His days with Carolina, a lot of Carolina fans were very upset with the way that he handled the Josh Norman contract, and that's completely understandable. He was a franchise player there. It ended up probably being the right decision. So just because he went out and acquired Leonard Williams doesn't mean that he won't play hardball when it comes to the contract. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.